We're still waiting for Councillor Robertson online and also for Councillor Mann, who's joining us. And Councillor Hales is an apology. If we could all please stand for the local government prayer and acknowledgement. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of our beautiful lands and our surrounding water, Damanjeri. As a community, we recognise and respect.
Almighty God, we ask you to bless this council and allow it to be an agent for change to the people of this city and beyond. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the honouring of your name and the welfare of the people whom it serves. Amen.
We gratefully acknowledge the men and women of the Navy, Army and Air Force who made the supreme sacrifice in the preservation of Australia's freedom and democracy. We also proclaim our gratitude to those who return to us.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. And welcome everybody. As I said, we're still waiting for two people, but Deputy Mayor Hales is an apology. And welcome to those people in the gallery and also to those people who may be watching us via the live stream. It's been a fabulous 3 or 4 weeks in Victor Harbor. We've had the Red Hot Summer Tour, which I'm sure many people went to. I know many councillors and staff went to that, and the fringe events. And I think looking at that and the Summer Sounds Festival over the weekend, and it really shows that our economic development strategy is working to help us both receive grant funding for those events through the Better Building Regions funding program and to support the development of our festivals and event strategies. And I can certainly say to the people of Victor Harbor that this strategy and funding is going to assist us into the future to bring more of these sorts of events to Victor Harbor because we really saw Victor Harbor come alive with both the small little fringe events and the large events. So well done to all of the staff. The other thing that I wanted to say before we got started is that I went to the British Classic Tour event on Sunday and gave out some of the prizes for that. That was the 10th year that council has sponsored and been involved in the British Classics Tour. And in recognition of that, I hope that people can see the plaque. I'll put it in the members lounge and then I'll give it to Graham Pathouse to distribute to his staff so that they can have a look at it. The plaque says, presented to Mayor Moira Jenkins with gratitude and appreciation for 10 years of valued collaboration between the Victor Harbor Council and the Historic Motor Vehicles Club. So they were very, very appreciative of the work that the elected members have done in supporting them from a strategic point of view, and also very appreciative of the staff who have been very supportive on the day and have given them lots of advice. So I'll pop that in the elected members room for you. Welcome, Councillor Robertson.
Thank you.
We are now up to item 5, which is minutes of the previous meeting of the 28th, and the recommendation is that those minutes be confirmed as true and accurate. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconded Councillor Henderson. Does anybody have any questions about those minutes or any queries? No, in that case, then all those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. 5.2, minutes of the special council meeting of the 1st of March, and the recommendation is that those minutes are confirmed as true and accurate. Do I have someone to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Kemp, and seconded by, thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions to relate to minutes or any queries? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. There are no deputations. We do have from the gallery. So, Councillor Charles, Pete. Mr. Charles, you have some questions, and I'd ask you please to keep your preamble quite short and to the point in relation to your questions.
Questions possible from the members that I would never read all of this all at once. It would not be possible. So I've made some adjustments to it hurriedly within the prescribed time. And I imagine the whole lot, though, will be put into the minutes because that's how it's been presented. The preamble is important. But I'll start with my first question, or the question from Team Victor's question is directed to CEO McCurdy. Is it correct that you are the immediate past president of the Local Government Professionals Australia, and you're also a member of the Local Government Professionals South Australia, and that they are two separate entities that collaborate? You said you also hold membership in the AICD, the Australian Institute of Company Directors. What's that noise? It's not me. Which makes it three professional organisations that you subscribe to. Would you please qualify in the following, or clarify the following? Professional associations, I beg your pardon. The Register of Salaries for the City of Victor Harbor as of yesterday states the Chief Executive Officer.
Mr. Charles, I think that your preamble related to your questions quite clearly. In relation to the first question, the only personal membership the CEO currently has is for the Australian Institute of Company Directors. She is a board member of Local Government Professionals Australia, and the council itself is a member of the Local Government Nation. The CEO's contract does not limit her to a single membership. The register has the word "a" within the notes section. However, this is not correct. The word "a" or "a" will be removed from the register. While the CEO's contract enables her to certain allowances and benefits, it doesn't mean that they're all drawn upon. So, for example, it allows her for a computer at home. She does it at home. So I think that those two responses answer your question. And they will be in the minutes.
Thank you for interjecting, because that's rather convenient. It gives me a bit more time with the other one. And I see that mistakes can be made, and you'll note that that was what was written down. Perhaps it's misleading, perhaps it's wrong, perhaps it's a misprint, something to that effect. Okay.
I can assure you, Mr. Charles, it is a misprint and it will be rectified.
Okay, thank you. The next one I've also abridged. Team Victor as a matter of strong public interest, seek a detailed explanation as to how asbestos was included in the crushed aggregate which was sold to commercial clients and hundreds of members of the public by trailer load.
Can you just, sorry, Mr. Charles, Councillor Robertson, I think your microphone was on. If you can just keep it off unless you're talking, because we're getting some feedback. Thank you. Carry on.
Okay. Thank you. Still there. This aggregate was sold to commercial clients and hundreds of members by the public by trailer load, all continuingly undetected over a period of 3 years. Fluores, Regional Waste Authority, licensed by the EPA, Environment Protection Authority, was required to have exceedingly stringent testing in place according to the clear regulations of the EPA licensing and required under the Environmental Protection Act 1993. Planning for establishment of the authority commenced in 2007 and has been fully functional.
Can you please ask your question without such a long preamble? This isn't
well, I think this is, it's distinctively important for people who are watching here in the background. You may well know the details, and perhaps this is not something that the council want to express publicly.
The council is more than happy to answer your question.
Well, then let me continue. I have time.
The council is happy to answer your questions. If you want to provide further detail to South Coast Television behind you, as you just inferred, then you're happy to do that afterwards. But we will answer your questions, and the council, but you need to ask your question.
What can one say to that?
Well, you can ask your question. Thank you.
Indeed. as Victor Harbour's own audit committee have flagged, this issue is extreme. And similarly, Fluores state the number of contaminated properties is very likely to increase. I think you just need to have a look at the EPA website to get the facts. Does this council and the councillors agree with Team Victor that the residents and ratepayers are totally within their rights to have a full detailed explanation as to what was the testing regime of the aggregate and why it was not detected within days and not years?
The council's aware that Fluores is working very hard to address and to remediate all affected sites, and they're working with the EPA according to EPA requirements. That process, which is being conducted transparently, has to be the current focus, and that is what they're doing. Any further investigations of the circumstances leading to the unfortunate situation that exists can be dealt with in due course, and will be. Is there anything else that you want to add, CEO? No?
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
The Fluores have absolutely no choice but to obey what the EPA say, and they're not
Thank
really
you.
doing this of
Thank
their own
you.
free will.
Thank
And
you very much, Mr. Charles, but
Not
that's
at
your
all.
question has
Thank
been
you
answered.
very much. Pity that the volunteers of Victor Harbour save so much money and we can waste so many millions in one crack.
There are no petitions. So we move now on to item 9, Office of the Chief Executive Officer and the outstanding resolutions. The recommendation will receive a report for March 2022. Would someone like to move that way? Welcome, Braden. I didn't see you come in. Thank you. Moving that way, Councillor Schofield, and seconding. Thank you, Councillor Robertson, seconding that. Does anybody have any questions or any queries about the outstanding resolutions? Councillor Kemp and then Councillor Robertson. Oh, sorry, Councillor Robertson. You seconded that. Sorry, Councillor. Councillor Schofield. Councillor Schofield, did you want to speak to that? No. Councillor Robertson, you moved that you seconded that. Would you like to speak to it first and then Councillor Kemp?
Mayor, I have 2 questions, that's all.
Yep.
Okay, page 18. The South Australian Wales Centre Education Services Partnership at the bottom of the page. It says here that staff have met with Alexandra and Renee to work through arrangements, including the agreement. Agreement has been signed by the City of Victor Harbour, currently with Alexandra and Renee for signing. This is not the case. Both of those contractors came to the council chambers at the beginning of February. We're now almost at the beginning of April, and they were handed the document to be signed. They signed it on the spot and handed it back over the counter. So the signed agreement is either down at the front counter or somewhere else in the building. But it's been almost 2 months to the day that that agreement has been signed, and so the signing of that should have been completed. But I'd like to know where it is, where the signed copy, fully signed copy is.
Through the mayor, I wasn't aware of that they'd signed it and submitted it over the counter, so I'll have to take that notice and look into it for you, Councillor Robertson.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Then on page 20, the reconciliation action plan, the first item on that page 20, and that is the follow-up action to my resolution without notice from last month, was that the administration to investigate the budget for and liaise with our reconciliation action plan group about putting 10 high-quality outdoor ready copies of the Uluru Statement around Victor Harbour. The follow-up action that's reported here, which is disappointing to me, is that this action will be considered as part of the Reconciliation Action Plan, which is currently in draft form. But later on tonight, it comes up as the sort of final draft of that. It's not included. My proposal is not included, and then it signs off with. So that's the first question: is that did the council do any estimations of budget for the procurement of 10 of those signs?
Yeah, through the mayor, I'll need to follow that up as well. Certainly, it seems that it would have been considered as part of the Reconciliation Action Plan group. Whether it got to budgeting or anything like that, I'm not too certain, so I'll have to follow that one up as well.
Yeah, the second part of
Through the mayor, sorry, Councillor Robertson, if I can just add to that, just noting that the resolution was obviously to liaise with the group that are actually developing the RAP, and the RAP is coming to council tonight in its draft form for the purposes of community consultation, and it also still needs to be approved by the Reconciliation Australia. So it wasn't a given that those 10 signs would be placed up. It's about considering whether the group considers that as the best means of demonstrating and educating our community on the Uluru Statement of the Heart. So it's still very much in its draft form. It certainly has not been overlooked.
Accepted, CEO, but did the administration investigate the budget for these signs?
Again, I'm not sure whether someone's actually done some costings at this stage. I can look into that for you.
The second question I have about the follow-up action, and I might return to this later on when we get to the Reconciliation Action Plan draft format. That is, it says here in the follow-up action, the RAP and its actions are required to be endorsed by Reconciliation Australia. And I'll just flag it at this stage, but it seems to me that we're entering into a very, very, very top-down process. That Reconciliation Australia is based in Canberra, and to what extent they're going to be micromanaging what we do in our reconciliation action plans down here is something to be taken careful note of. So I would just like to note that we'll see to what extent Reconciliation Australia is going to be giving the go-ahead or turning down potential actions in our own Reconciliation Action Plan. Okay, that was the end of my questions on this.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Just a question along the lines of the outstanding resolutions. I understand there is a commentary at the end of each one, but because we have around about 25 still outstanding and some drop off, some come on, just wondering why we have so many and how come it's taking a long time with some of them at least 3 years outstanding. Is it because we've short-staffed? Are we overworking our staff? We've got too much on our plate? What is part of the reasons why?
Can you be more specific?
All of them. I mean, we've got 25 outstanding resolutions. Why have we got such a list? And why aren't we not getting rid of them quickly enough? So it's really about process and managing the resolutions. Just wondering why we, don't seem to be making the list smaller. There's reasons.
I guess how long's a piece of string? Obviously, at the last council meeting, there was something like 28 single resolutions for delegations. So that obviously adds to it. We're doing a significant amount of work and number of reports coming to council. So yes, there's always a number of resolutions. So it's constantly being updated and completed. Some of them are outstanding, yes, through various reasons. Some are waiting on information from other parties. Some of them we're waiting on information from government departments. Some take longer than others. I can't give you an exact answer. I'd need to answer everyone specifically, which I probably could do if you wish me to. But it's ongoing. Every single month, council makes more decisions and more outstanding resolutions get added to the list, and then some come off, as you say.
Yeah, I'm not going to ask you to go through each one individually, but I was just sort of thinking that because we drop off projects, because we just don't have the capability to do them, I'm just wondering if this is the same case with the resolutions that, you know, our capacity and capability to do everything is a bit overloading, you know, for our council.
Yeah, I think if any of these were in terms of capacity, we'd obviously highlight those in the notes. I would say most of these is just we're waiting on the long-standing issues and we're waiting on information from other parties. I know some of the particularly long ones are.
Are there any further questions or comments in relation to the outstanding resolutions? No, in that case, then all those in favour of that recommendation? Those against? We now move to item 9.2, which is the caretaker policy review. And I'll do that recommendation on block, recommendation 1 and 2, receiving and noting the review report and adopting the caretaker policy. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Littley. Seconder for that, thank you, Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that? No. Councillor Schofield, do you want to speak to that? No. Does anybody want to speak to that or have any questions? If not, all those in favour? And those against? That's carried, thank you. We now move to 9.3, the Remuneration Tribunal review of local government council member allowance feedback. And once again, I'll do that on block. First recommendation, receiving and noting the report. And the second recommendation, the council authorising the Chief Executive Officer to submit feedback in relation to the Remuneration Tribunal. Moving that way, Councillor Littley, and seconding Councillor Mann. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Mann?
I'd just like to thank Kyla and the team and administration for putting together the submission. I think it's a really strong next submission, so thank you.
Yes, I'd certainly echo that, Councillor Mann. I think they've done a really good piece of work with that. So if you could pass that on, Kelly, that would be great. Does anybody have any further comments? If not, I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. Item 9.4, the Council Best Practice Showcase for the Local Government Association meeting. I'll do the first two recommendations. That Council receive and note the report, and that Council endorse myself to attend the Council Best Practice Showcase, and on the 7th of April and Friday the 8th of April, the meeting. With someone moving that way, Councillor Littley, and seconding Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Henderson? No. Does anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. The third recommendation is that Council endorse the voting recommendations related to the recommendation reports from SAROC and GAROC for the ordinary general meeting. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson, thank you, and Councillor Littley seconding that. Either of you want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? Thank you. So the recommendation reports from SAROC. 7.1, the implementation, actually I'll just it's all covered under 3. Did you all realise that that was covered under 3? Yep. Okay, that's fine then. Item 9.5, the review of the Code of Practice for Meeting Procedures and the Code of Practice for Access to Meetings and Documents Emergency Declaration. The first recommendation is that council receive and note the report. Moving that way, councillor Mann, and seconding councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to the report? Does anybody want to speak to the report? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. Recommendation 2, that once COVID emergency management declaration ceases, rises executive officer practice as provided at attachment A and B. Move that way, councillor Henderson, and second Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I think just quickly to note, I don't necessarily think there's much requirement for this because I don't think the government's anytime soon going to have the emergency management declaration cease the way things are going. I personally hate the fact that it's removed the ability to have online meetings, in which case if it had gone and today, then we wouldn't have quorum tonight. Whilst there's still the issue, I think this just provides for more reason why the Local Government Act should be adopted to allow for electronic meetings outside of being tied to the emergency. But that's all I'm going to say on this.
Thank you, councillor Mann. Is there any further discussion? Not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried, thank you. Ten point one, Coral Street Arts Space Business Development. The first recommendation is that council receive and note the report. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, councillor Henderson, and seconded by, thank you, councillor Robertson. Either of you want to speak to the report? Anyone want to speak to the report? Councillor Kemp?
Just more of a question, thanks, Mayor Jenkins. We're going into this fully booted and spurred. I'm just wondering whether we should do a trial period before we really, expend too much money over a period of time, because we may not get enough artists to fulfil that space. So I'm just wondering, should we not trial it first before we actually overcommit?
This is a trial period.
Through the Mayor, it could be a trial period, but it probably doesn't make too much difference. If it's not taken up, it's not taken up. If it is taken up, it is. So if it's not taken up after a course of time, or if it is taken up and doesn't work out, council can stop providing that the opportunity for artists to do that. So whilst it could be a trial period, there's probably no need really in terms of the way it sits.
Yeah, the reason why I raised it on that point, because the amount of money we're going to be expending to set it up, it's a lot of money, around about $12,000 in the report. Whether we could look at doing some type of smaller before we spend the money to see if we get enough interest from artists to fulfil it.
Through the Mayor, the cost of setting up the actual cubes themselves is $2,000. The other cost is more associated with the dedicated area for First Nations exhibition. So that's the difference there. So 10 of it's around a specific area for the First Nations artists.
Are there any further questions in relation to recommendation 1, that is the report? If not, I'll put that to the floor. Oh, councillor Robertson, you want to talk to the report?
Yeah, it's just to the report itself, Mayor. I think it would have been good if the design of these spaces had been included. I'm on the committee, and part of the discussions about what went on, I fully support what's being put in here, but myself, I wasn't clear at all on where these cubes would go, and I understand that they're kind of mobile, I guess they'll be on casters, or something like that, or easily moved. But the amount of space that's going to be taken up by them, I think, I mean, it does give the dimensions there, 2 meters by 3 meters. But I think when you come to have a look at the space that's available inside that building, would give council members a better idea of what was being proposed and how big the space for the First Nations people was. I think also it could have done with a bit more input into what are going to be the costs of doing this. The setting up of the cubes and the First Nation space, is $14,000. But there are a lot of things in this program proposal here to be having people having access for 24/7 and so on, which is going to increase costs. And I'm not just talking about electricity, but we'll be giving people keys to this space for them to have at all times, and so we're going to have to be looking at security arrangements for that place. I have some other questions about what we're doing in relation to the income from that, but I'll leave that till we get to question to recommendation 2. But I think a better idea of the total cost of what we're getting into would have been handy.
Are there any further discussion? Can you turn your microphone off, Councillor Robertson? Is there any further discussion about recommendation 1? No, in that case, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. Recommendation 2, council approve the applied studio. The rest of that is read. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Littley, and seconded by Councillor Schofield. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Littley? Councillor Schofield? No. Does anybody have any questions to speak to it, Councillor Robertson? You'll need to turn your microphone back on.
I have some comments on this. I think it's good that we're charging for these, although if this place is fully booked out, we're only going to get $3,700 worth of income for the year. So it's not a great amount, and I would hope that the place becomes so popular that we can actually increase that a bit, so that the financial burden on council becomes less. But I'm not sure that we should be offering people up to 3 months hire for these places. I think in the past we've seen that we need to have flexibility in terms of the use of the space, and if we give people a lease for 3 months, then it's theirs, and then we have to make arrangements to try and get them out of it. I think that it's quite long enough. In fact, I think even that a 1 month long installation in the art space there is the maximum we should be going for, because again, it just means that we're blocking off space for other people to use. We're reducing our flexibility in terms of who we can have in there. And we do have a dynamic environment down here for the use of the place. And we did have it fully booked out this year, 2022. We had it fully booked out at the end of 2021. So there wasn't any room left over for other people to come in. And I think the program that's being put on there at present is bringing a lot more interest to the site. And by having a 3 months hire rate, I would in fact be saying that if you want the place for 3 months and you pay us, $150 a week, to discourage that kind of thing, because we need to keep flexibility up. We need to get as many people through that site as possible, and giving people a reduction in renting for the monthly hire for a 3-month period, to me is counterproductive from what we're doing. So we ought to be working on bit by bit, having a greater confluence between the costs of running the place and also the income.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I just wonder whether or not, and Councillor Henderson's about to speak as well, but I'm just conscious both of you, Councillor Robertson and Councillor Henderson, are on the Arts and Culture Advisory Group. And I wondered whether or not this had been discussed at that group and what the thoughts of the group were in relation to this. So perhaps Councillor Henderson, you can answer that because you wanted to speak next.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, in reply to what Councillor Robertson has just said, I think we need to see this from the point of view of the artists who are going to occupy these spaces. And, you know, some projects may take a month, but other projects may take 3 months. And especially if the artists are planning to run a workshop involving community members, there's not a lot you can do in a month if you're running a workshop and you're involving people in developing their skills and interests and talents. So I think you've got to have that range of opportunities of different timeframes within which these artists are able to work. And even some of their individual projects may take 3 months to complete. Artists were created overnight.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Is there any further comments in relation to recommendation 2? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. 3 is to the introduction of a dedicated exhibition area for representatives of the Remuneration and Narrandjeri community and a waive of the introduction of fixed charges. Moving that way, Councillor Littley. And do I have a seconder for that? Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Littley?
Yeah, only to say that I think this is a fantastic lead opportunity for when we're talking about RAP programs as well, but to exhibit or invite the Remuneration and Narrandjeri people to have a space that's really starts to set in train a thought process, showcase our culture here. I think it's fantastic. So absolutely, I support it.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Councillor Henderson?
Yes, I just want to add that these motions before us tonight are really going back to the original thinking and plans around the Coral Street Art Place, if you like. That has been revisited.
Sorry, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Robertson's on the phone at the moment. I don't know whether or not we want to wait for him to finish. Councillor Robertson?
Yeah.
Have you finished?
Yes, I have.
Thank you. Carry on, Councillor Henderson.
Thanks, Mayor. I was just saying that the motions in front of us here tonight are going back to some of the original discussions around how the Coral Street art space was to be used, and both motions 2 and 3 are part of this, going back and revisiting what was proposed originally and coming back to refresh our outlook on how the space is used into the future. And the Aboriginal art space will be that first room as you enter the Coral Street art space, and that will be the space dedicated to their artwork, the Remuneration and Narrandjeri community artworks. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion or questions in relation to recommendation 3? If not, all those in favour? And those against? Yeah. And I think especially given that we're doing our reconciliation action plan at the moment, and I know that all of the elected body have really joined together to talk about the need for a dedicated Remuneration and Narrandjeri art space somewhere in Victor Harbour. I think this is a great beginning to have part of the Coral Street Art Space dedicated to the work of our First Nations people. So thank you very much to all of the staff and your team, Graham, who have been working very hard in that, and also to the representatives, that's Councillor Robertson and Councillor Henderson on our Arts and Culture Advisory Committee. I think the committee and the staff have done a great job in bringing this forward at this point in time. We now move to the Volunteer Week Small Grants Program. And the first recommendation is that Council receive and note the report. If someone would like to move that way, thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconding Councillor Henderson. Either of you want to speak to that report? No, anyone want to speak to that report? All those in favour? And those against? Now, in the second recommendation, are there any grant applications that anybody wants to take out to discuss before we go to the second recommendation? Councillor Kemp?
No, I don't, Mayor Jenkins, but just want to declare a perceived conflict of interest as I'm a member of the Kangaroo Board of Management in the Fluores FM. I just want to say that I think it's appropriate, because it's election year this year, that, you know, if anybody gets invited along to these functions, and that not to use it as a platform for campaigning, because we're not allowed to start campaigning for nominations closed. And I would have only said that only because it's election year this year, that's all. But I do have a perceived conflict of interest. So I'll stay in the room and not vote.
Thank you. I'll ask now if someone would like to move that way. Thank you, Councillor Littley, and seconded by Councillor Henderson. Any discussion in relation to recommendation 2? All those in favour? And those against? Um, 10.3, University of the Third Age. Oh, I beg your pardon. And we do have recommendation that council approve an additional payment of either $25 or $50 to the named groups below. Moving that way, Councillor Littley, thank you, and Councillor Schofield. Are there any questions in relation to that? Any queries? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. Now 10.3. Actually, we can do the 2 recommendations together if you're happy to do that. If somebody would like to move recommendation 1 and recommendation 2, thank you, Councillor Littley and Councillor seconding that. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Littley? Councillor Schofield, do you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to it or have any questions? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think this is a good thing for us. So I'll be wondering how University of the Third Age will be dealing with construction works and the cost of those. Although the council is going to be helping them out with material costs, I understand from this. My question about this is that though it's a good thing for the University of the Third Age, but has any count been taken of what's going to happen to parking in that area? The increased use of that facility by larger numbers of people. The University of the Third Age at present has uses the facilities on Wednesday afternoons and all day Thursday, but presumably they'll be making more use of it. This is going to be creating a problem, I think, in just like Carrikalinga, where we're going to be starting to put ourselves into a situation where we're going to have to be sorting out calls for increased arrangements for parking. So was parking given into consideration when the council negotiated this?
Through the Mayor, Councillor Robertson, the parking for this one's a little bit different to Carrickillega House because the old school building is part of the development site that became Victor Central. So the parking demand evaluation and assessment work would have been done when those development applications, or the initial development application and that's the subsequent development application that increased the footprint of the building, that would have been done when those development applications occurred. That would have taken into account the capacity of the buildings just as it would the capacity of the shopping centre, and calculated it out at that particular point in time based on the capacity of the buildings. So in that sense, the car parking has been considered as part of another exercise. So it's for all intents and purposes, it's given that parking is then sufficient.
Another question, if I might, Director Padhouse. This agreement runs for 3 years until June 2025. Imagine over that time, looking at further increases in requirements for parking. So I presume that that this agreement is also something that the Victor Central Shopping Centre management also has approved of.
Yes, that's correct. The parking demand won't change. It's based on the capacity. The capacity of the building is the same now as it will be in 3 years' time. But yes, the centre management are aware of it and they're supportive of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Are there any other questions, Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I think this is a great opportunity again for the University of the Third Age, because I know they do struggle to find venues to hold their meetings and for their community, especially the older generation, and of course a lot of people fantastic background or information as to what they do. I see this as the first step in a long process of where opportunities come our way as a council to develop new community centres, and take in mind this is what we want to do, is to give an opportunity for groups like this to access those community centres so they can do what they do very well for the community. So I certainly do support this.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp, and I couldn't agree with you more. I'll put that to the floor now. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried, thank you. We now move to item 10.4, which is the draft Reflect Reconciliation. I'm having trouble saying that word tonight, aren't I? Reconciliation Action Plan. And of course, this Reconciliation Action Plan is being developed as a respect plan, which is the first stage in reconciliation action plans with the Reflect plan with Reconciliation Australia. I will do both recommendations together unless anybody objects. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Littley and Councillor Robertson seconding that. Do you want to speak to it, Councillor Littley?
Again, I'll just say that I think there's a great deal of work being put into this, and it's very good to see that being put in. Couple little parts of the report I found interesting. I found it interesting that our council staff has just 5 of its 134 members of staff who are Indigenous or recognise themselves as Indigenous or Torres Strait Islanders. I thought we might have had a few more, particularly with our school population. We have got one of the higher Aboriginal representatives in our school population of the whole state, but it's great to see some very good work in there, and this is reflecting and understanding who we are as a community and who makes up our community as well. So that's the first stage of this whole process, is understanding, reflecting on who we are. So it's great, and plenty more steps to go, and I'm sure we'll get there in a very good manner.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Councillor Robertson.
Yes, Mayor, I asked before, but you didn't pick it up, that I wanted the two recommendations to be done separately.
I beg your pardon, I didn't pick that up, Councillor Robertson.
That's okay.
You,
But I did have my hand up to have them done separately.
I beg your pardon, I didn't pick that up. When you're on the Zoom, you might have to just make sure that your hand is really visible to me. Otherwise it's easy
That's
to
what it
miss.
is.
Yep, beautiful. Thank you. So Councillor Littley has moved them on block. Are you happy to second them on block?
Yes, if we just discuss them one each,
You can,
each one.
yep. So what would you like to say?
The yeah, on the report itself that we have in front of us, I was quite frankly disappointed. I can see that there's been a lot of work being done in this, but I noticed that this is entirely a staff-driven process, and the only elected member on this group is yourself, Mayor. That, you know, it's as if the rest of the elected members here either don't need to be involved or don't seem to have, the staff point of view, any kind of feeling on this issue, any kind of interest in it.
Councillor Robertson, can I just say you were all invited to be part of the RAP committee on a number of occasions. Nobody wanted to go, and I put my hand up and said that I would go, but everybody, all of the elected members are invited to take part in this and to be part of it, and still are if you would like to, come along.
Yes, I definitely would, but I don't remember that. But that doesn't mean anything. But I'm also disappointed that we've gone ahead with this process, and we haven't included Business Victor Harbour in this. I don't think, but I stand to be corrected. One of the key performance indicators out of a process like this is economic, and that'll primarily be, well, in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, how many First Nation youth locally will be employed or in apprenticeship or whatever. That's going to be driven by the extent to which the business community picks up and runs with this. So to me, I also am not happy with the fact that here we have allocated a totally inadequate amount of money for the community consultation. As far as I can see, what we've got down here is $450. Now we would spend 10, 20 times that amount of money on a public consultation on a bikeway, or even double that amount on a arts and culture centre. But here we have, and I think that I'm very proud of the work that the communications staff do in relation to our public consultations. I think they do a great job, and it's getting better. But on this occasion here, I think that the community consultation process at the back here is really hollow. It's really totally inadequate. And where's the guidelines for putting this out for public comment?
Councillor Robertson, if I may, I'm sorry to interrupt your comments, but I'm not sure whether you are completely across what the Reconciliation Action Plan is about, an organisation's attempt in terms of reconciliation. It's not, and while we obviously are consulting with our community on any plans that we do, because we are an organisation who provides services and support to our community, the City of Victor Harbour, the community, but reconciliation action plans are prepared and endorsed by organisations. They are a way in which organisations play their part in reconciliation, ensuring that we are addressing and recognising our First Nations people. We're employing our First Nations people. We are actually including them in decisions and things that we're doing within our organisation. So it's a plan for us as an organisation to ensure that we're addressing reconciliation. You'll see organisations like Flinders University, the banks, big corporations are adopting reconciliation action plans to ensure that they, organisations, play their part. So it's different to consultation where we're making changes to a bike path or building a community facility like an arts and cultural precinct. This is about City of Victor Harbor, the organisation, and the part we play. So it's a bit different in terms of what you're reflecting in your comments. And you are our board of directors, elected members. Hence, we've involved you in this process because we take guidance from you in terms of decisions, but ultimately it's the organisation, the business, who are implementing the RAP, as opposed to an overall, for example, whether it's another agreement that we have with our First Nation people as a community. Your comments around Business Victor Harbor, they would be ones who would create their own RAP as what they would be doing for their organisation to address reconciliation, as would all the businesses who are members of Business Victor Harbor. This is about the City of Victor Harbor as an organisation playing its part.
Thank you, CEO. That's fine, and I don't have issue with anything you've said there, except that let's look at page 111, which is the engagement tools for this process. You know, half of the City of Victor Harbor doesn't exist as an island. It is elected and paid for by the ratepayers of the city. So, and we will either be a very important player in achieving reconciliation locally because of what we do, or if we mess it up, you know, then we'll be a very bad player. This, to me, the process we're going through at present is one that's being put on at huge speed, except that if you look on page 111, here we've got $450 being budgeted for this process of engagement with our ratepayers. Half of 40% of our ratepayers exist in Adelaide, and we've got nothing in here as to how we engage with them. I would suggest that they're quite an important part of the engagement process. And even though, you know, Business Victor Harbor may develop its own, I've no idea whether they're developing their own reconciliation action plan, but we're supposed to be working in partnership. So we're not exactly joined at the hip.
Again, agree, Councillor Robertson, I do agree, but if you realise the differences in the reconciliation plans that you can create, or we are creating, we are members of the Reconciliation Action Plan group in South Australia or Australia. So reflect, innovate, stretch, elevate. Our reflect, we're consulting, it's almost an informing our community of what we're currently doing. So we're reflecting on what we have in place, how we're positioned, how we currently interact with our First Nations people, recognising that and educating. Our next step would be around our next plan, because we need to do another one, would be innovate. Again, we would obviously be doing much deeper consultation when we're looking at innovate, because we're looking for creative ideas and new ideas and where we do the next plan.
Okay, I don't have any problem with that, CEO, but you know, look at what we're doing here on the page 111. We're going out, consultation is going to take place in April, all of April here by the look of it. In May, we're going to be doing the collation and feedback.
You have 1 minute left, Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, we have 1 month in May to collate the feedback. But what are we putting out to the, to consultation? Is it the pages beforehand, which is the 8 or 10 pages of the action plan, draft action plan? Is that what we're putting out, and we don't have any format or guidance as to what we're expecting back from our ratepayers? I think this is a terribly flawed process, and if it falls over, we're in trouble.
Well, the entire plan is what's being consulted on with our community, and we are being guided by Reconciliation Australia, who have developed many of these plans to ensure that we currently capture, and we are informing our community, engaging with our community to make sure that we've captured everything that we currently do. Maybe there are some things that we've missed. So the whole plan is what we're consulting on. We're engaging to say, this is what we're doing. This is where we currently are. Is there any things you think we've missed? Any further things you think we could do? But again, some of that feedback may be built into our Innovate plan. It's not quite relevant now.
Okay, and I'll just add through the Mayor that the budget set on page 111 that Councillor Robertson's referring to is for those things that cost the council money from its budget. There's a number of other actions and activities that are also taking place outlined on the top of page 10. So beyond the barbecue at Moerang, the Your Say website will have feedback forms, discussion, and individuals can participate through that. There's other networks that will be connected with as part of the work as well. So it's not limited to those things that are covered by the budget. There's a number of other things that are covered under current staff resources that will also be delivered as part of the work.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Does anybody else want to speak to this? No, Councillor Little, you moved it. Did you want to say anything? You'd like to close? Yep.
I'm just going to add there, having listened to Councillor Robertson there, I think that it might be a case of needing to go back and read that plan and read the full plan. Having been a member of the News Corp's Reconciliation Action Plan, a board member of the Around the Campfire Incorporated, which is an education and health initiative for people of Indigenous or First Nations people. Having been a member of the Red Tails Right Tracks program, also aimed at youth and engaging youth in Indigenous communities, and having worked for the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation in a high profile role, I think that our first steps in our reconciliation action plan, I'm having the same problem as the Mayor, our first steps to reflect are fantastic and efficient, and it's a really great first step. Having just sat upon this last year, we've really stepped it up very quickly. So I think it's a fantastic first step endeavour, and there's many more great things to come in our reconciliation action plan with future councils as we go through them.
Thank you, Councillor Little. That closes the debate on that. I'd like to put the recommendation on block to the floor. All those in favour? Against? That's carried.
Can I be excused for 2 minutes?
Yep, we'll have a break for 5 minutes if people would like to have a break. Are you all happy to have a break? You're saying no, you don't want a break? All right, you can go. Thank you. We now move to item 10.5, Arts, Culture and Heritage Strategy, Community Engagement. The first recommendation is that Council receive and note the Arts, Culture and Heritage Strategy Community Engagement Report. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconding Councillor Kemp. Do either of you want to speak to that report? Does anybody want to speak to that report? No. In that case, then I'll put. And those against? That's carried. The second recommendation, Council proceed to public consultation on the draft Arts, Culture and Heritage Strategy. Someone like to move that second recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconded Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to that? No. Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Again, I'm looking at the budget for this community engagement. I think it's written down as $500. I don't know whether that's correct or not, but anyway, it's a very small amount. I would have thought for this engagement. So, you know, I'm wondering what we expect to get out of it. To some extent, doesn't necessarily always work, but the amount of money you put aside for something is gives you a certain result. And to me, that what we have set aside for the engagement is not enough.
Kelly, Graham?
Through the mayor, again, the number or the budget number just is reflective of those things that cost us money out of the budget within the engagement. It's not about the staff resources and other activities that are put into the engagement. So as part of this engagement, there'll be meetings with various groups, artist groups, opportunities for, once again, opportunities for the community to participate through the ORSE website. There'll be distribution of information through the monthly online, the email newsletter, Victor Viewpoint, that goes out every month. So there's a number of other measures that we use for all of this as well. It's not just about those things that cost money. I'd probably encourage Councillor Robertson to read the engagement plan in its entirety, to perhaps get a better understanding of what the engagement activities are.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Graham Padhouse. You've got another question, Councillor Robertson?
Yes, back to Councillor, to Director Padhouse. I have read the engagement plan, and maybe this is one of those issues where in council, when it comes to say, okay, it's a staff time, so it doesn't cost the council any cash. Hello, I mean the staff time does cost the council money, and this budgeting of activities that we only put it in if it's going to cost actual cash outlay. To me, it doesn't indicate that because you've got to get a certain amount of promotional material out to get an issue in front of the public, and then to be able to get them to give you feedback, that this comes to the heart of this whole business of to what extent do we want to engage with our community, and having whether we hide away the costs of the staffing in terms of it's just buried in somewhere in the salary structure. To me, it's not a proper accounting for the costings that we're giving, and $500 at present, to me is a very small amount for this.
Councillor Robertson, I'll see if Kelly Knight Stacey can answer your query. However, just be careful in terms of insinuating that things are being buried in funny accounting systems. It's probably not that professional to suggest that. Kelly might be able to enlighten you a bit.
Thank you, through the Mayor. So in line with Graham Padhouse's commentary, the amount for the budget in here is purely around that advertising cost for public notices and media releases. And in many ways, I agree with you, Councillor Robertson, that we could expand on the way we explain the budget implications for all the activities we undertake. We actually have had some discussions around reviewing our template that we use to provide more of a overview of both the resource implications and the budget implications in terms of costs or purchases that need to be made. So we'll take that point and continue working on that. But I do agree with you. We could look to provide more information going forward, but we're still working on what that looks like in a way that we can easily get the numbers rather than doing some practice or process that takes a long time to provide that info. So we are working on it.
Are there any further comments, Tree? If not, I will to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now move to item 10.6, and you would have all received an updated memorandum from Director Padhouse. Did you receive that, Tim? Yep. Did anybody not receive it? All right. So The first recommendation is that council receive and note the Arts and Culture Centre finalisation of current design stage report. Moving councillor Henderson and seconding councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that? No. Does anybody have any questions or want to speak to that report? All those in favour? Those against? The second recommendation is that council adopt the architectural design and documentation for the Arts and Culture Centre project as presented under separate cover for the purposes of lodging a development application. Moving councillor Henderson and seconding, I have a seconder for that. Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that? No. Councillor Schofield. You'll need to turn your microphone on. Councillor Schofield, your microphone's off. Do you want to speak, Councillor Schofield? You'll need to turn your microphone on, Carol. No. You don't want to, do you want to speak? Push the space bar. She doesn't want to speak? Okay. Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp.
Yes, I'll move to adjourn this motion due to the fact that we've only received this tonight. And when we have motions without notice, I know that it's not accepted and it's put on notice if there's budget considerations. I don't think we've had time to look at exactly what the changes are from what was being presented in our papers. So that's why I'm moving to adjourn this. Better time for the implications of it.
Councillor Kemp's moving to adjourn it. Do I have a seconder to adjourn it? Councillor Andrew Robertson, rather, you're seconding that?
Sorry, councillor Kemp, just in terms of the formal motion, adjourn it to a subsequent meeting of council to enable a workshop or members to have time to read. I just need time and a reason.
Thank you, CEO. Yes, you're right. I should have added that on there. To adjourn it to maybe a workshop where we can actually discuss it in more detail and have further opportunity to ask more questions to get the information of the implications of what this may bring to us.
So that formal motion is made by councillor Kemp.
Oh, through the mayor, if that was to succeed, the expectation is perhaps that we could put it to the CASPAC meeting that's scheduled for next week, or the workshop that's scheduled for next week, Tuesday.
And seconded by, sorry, who was the person that seconded that? Thank you, councillor Robertson. All those in favour of adjourning this motion? And those against adjourning this motion? I just ask, in making the final, sorry, the casting vote, that's what I'm looking for. I just ask a question in relation to budget. This is not requiring any extra budget. Sorry. Votes for 3. I thought it was a tied vote. Oh, I beg your pardon. Okay, good. That's fine. So it was to adjourn. Okay, that's great. That's adjourned. I must have missed somebody in the count. So that recommendation is adjourned. We still have another recommendation here. Councillor Kemp.
I move to adjourn this motion because it is in context with this motion that's just been adjourned. I think we need to discuss both motions at the next workshop.
Except that I put the second motion and that was adjourned. I think I need to put the third motion and that be adjourned.
Point of order, it should really be that the item is adjourned. This item. is
Correct,
adjourned.
that's what I'm just trying to clarify. Sorry, councillor Glasbrook, I didn't have my microphone on. I'm just clarifying that the formal motion has adjourned the matter. So both 2 and 3 will come back to the meeting once a workshop has been held.
All right, so we move. Item 12, Encounter Bay Sporting Precinct. And the recommendation is that council receive and note the report. Thank you. Moved councillor Schofield. And do I have a seconder for that? Do I have a seconder for receiving and noting the report? Thank you, councillor Littley. Are there any discussions in relation to the report? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Just a bit of clarity around the letter that came in from the Encounter Bay Sporting Complex and Recreation Ground Group. There's no date on the letter, so it's hard to say whether it's in 21 or it's just current. But they make reference to stage 4 where they talk about the Gillespie land to incorporate a basketball stadium, a little athletics field, etc. What my question is basically they seem to Encounter Bay Sporting Precinct seems to include that new development as part of the Encounter Bay Sporting Precinct. I thought it was a Fluores Regional Sporting Precinct, the indoor basketball courts and the athletics grounds and all that. So I'm just wondering clarity around, has there been a name change that I'm not aware of? But they're under the impression it will be part of their precinct. Just want a clarity on that.
Kathy, can you clarify that?
Thank you, through the Mayor. The letter that is here, the undated one, is part of their original proposal that was tabled at council in 21. So you're right, no date, sorry about that, but it is 21. So when they were referring to it there, they were talking about the process of the Gillespie land extending Encounter Bay. So it's from 21.
Are there any further questions in relation to this item? No, in that case, put it to the floor. All those in favour? Are those against? That's carried. Thank you. Item 13, minutes of council. Local roads. Bold has been put, the page is in the wrong place. Local roads and community infrastructure program phase 2. The recommendation I will do on block unless anybody has any objection to that. Do it on block. Brian, Councillor Littley, you're moving that way. Do I have a seconder for that on block? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Either of you want to speak to those two recommendations? Anybody want to speak to those two recommendations? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Just a question. Can we achieve this in the timeframes that we set up? We have to expend this money this financial year. Can we achieve all this work with all the other work commitments that we have on our plate as well?
Yes, I believe we can. I was very clear about that before we put it back to the federal government, because we obviously have a commitment to meet the deadline with the federal government funding. And yes, this is about ensuring we can utilise our existing workforce, and there's some contracted work, but we made sure that we could deliver it within the timeframe.
A supplementary question, if I may. Would this mean then we'll stop other projects to ensure that these ones are finished?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, no, we won't. Some of the delivery though, so for example, the Waterport Road resealing will be added to part of our contractor annual resealing program. So similarly, some of the footpath projects will be added to contractor programs. So we will be adding components, not necessarily, well, not stopping what we're doing.
Are there any further questions, comments? Councillor Glasbrook?
Oh, not a question. I've obviously, this was the updated version of the agenda. Is that correct?
Yes, it was. We only received notification on the Tuesday that the council members' agenda went out, so we then update it on for the Thursday for the public agenda.
Okay. Sorry, I've missed that. So not really sure what it is that we're discussing. So I'm not sure what I should do about that, but I should just.
No, it's well, you can't abstain from voting, unfortunately, but I can. It's regarding the Local Roads Community Infrastructure Grant. The list of items that we prepared and presented to members, you were at the workshop, that we wanted to do in replace of the library. The federal government has approved. I gave the guarantee back to the chamber that it would come back for final approval. So we got the approval from the federal government on Tuesday, and we're just wanting council to endorse that so we can get underway and get those works done. I can read the list of those items if that's easier.
I can remember that. That's fine. Thank you.
You remember that? Thank you.
Yes.
Are there any further questions in relation to those recommendations? No, I'll put them to the floor then. All those in favour? Those against? Minutes of council committee meeting. Yep. Minutes of council committee meetings. The recommendation is the council receive and note the minutes of the Fluores Regional Community Services Advisory Meeting, moved by Councillor Henderson, seconded by Councillor Schofield. Does anybody have any questions in relation to those minutes? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. Um, 13.2, Recreation Small Grants Program Individual Application. I'll do that recommendation en bloc. And the second recommendation is endorsing an individual grant for Connor Daniels for the National Beach Volleyball Championships to Coolangatta with the amount of $400. Someone like to move both recommendations, receiving the report and to give Connor Daniels $400. Thank you, Councillor Mann, and Councillor Henderson seconding that. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Robertson.
Mayor, I just want to get clarity on the council's policy in relation to the provision of individual grants. My understanding was that that individual grants were rarely, if ever, given, but it seems we keep on doing it regularly. What is the latest policy on this this matter?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, and individuals can apply at any time, Councillor Robertson, through the grant, and it will be considered. The grant for groups we call for twice a year, but individuals can apply and receive grants up to 3 times before, and that is the limit under the guidelines unless there is an exception made by the chamber. So individuals can continue to apply.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions or any commentary? In that case, I'll put the recommendation on block. Those in favour? That's carried, thank you. We now come to the subsidiaries and representative reports. And the recommendation is that council receive and note the reports for March. Somebody move that way, please. Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconded Councillor Kemp. Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody want to speak to this? All those in favour? Those against? So you're against, Councillor Kemp? Yeah. That's carried, thank you. We now move to 14.2, Fluores Regional Waste Authority's Financial Performance Report and Second Budget Review. And the recommendation, if people are happy, I'll do on block, receiving the report and endorsing the report and second budget review. If someone would like to move that way. Thank you, Councillor Littley. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Do either of you want to speak to that? No. Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Because the Fluores made a December report of $497,574 surplus and potentially $592,007 at the end of the year, is it understanding that a subsidiary, if they make a surplus, return that money back to the constituent councils and not make profits? And if so, I know we have discussed this a bit before, but I think I'm just wondering what was the reasons why we allow them to keep that money, give it back to the councils, considering our rates are always, sorry, considering our fees are going up every year for the Fluores to run.
Ellie?
Thank you, through the Mayor. So yeah, generally they would be required to provide the amounts back to the constituent councils, and that would be a reconciliation that was done near the end of the financial year. The last 2 years they have retained some of those surpluses to help offset the costs of the asbestos rehabilitation and rectification works, and that's what they're planning to do again in terms of their 22-23 budget and carrying that forward. So in that way, council won't have to essentially pay additional amounts in any loan borrowings that they need to take out. So that's the proposal that they're putting forward at this stage.
Are there any further questions or any further commentary in relation to the en bloc recommendations? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. 14.3, the Victor Harbour Horse Tram Authority Cash Advance Debenture Loan. And again, I will do that recommendation en bloc. First recommendation being the report, and the second recommendation that council acting as a guarantor for a $200,000 cash advance debenture loan. The Local Government Finance Authority. Moving that way, Councillor Littley, thank you. And seconding that, thank you, Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. A couple of things around the risk management of this. Talks about the financial management as a risk. The cash advance debenture loan request in line with the budget approved by council. The Victor Harbour Horse Tram Authority assessed the management plan. The risk is assessed as low, but I always thought the financial management risk was if they can't pay this $200,000 back and we come guarantor, what is the risk to council then to pick up that bill? There is a risk and there's a budget implication because there's an operating cost which will go directly onto our rates. So I would have thought that that was a bit of a misnomer there on the financial management risk, but also, again, according to Ms. Kelly Knight Stacey on the budget implication, that there is an implication if it's not paid. What is that future implication? This is the type of data that we would like to know more about when we're making decisions. You could answer those, please.
Yeah, thank you through the mayor. So in terms of the loan that they're looking to take out, it's a CAD or a variable loan that's going to be used basically to assist with cash flow during the year and minor capital purchases now that the authority is actually responsible for replacing minor plant and equipment themselves. So the possibility that it would all be drawn down based on discussions with the authority is extremely low. In terms of the risk to council, $200,000 for council in our total budget, and looking at repayments that council would incur on $200,000 if we had to take that on, is low in terms of how that would need to be paid. The fact that it's a variable loan as well would mean that it wouldn't need to be paid out in its entirety in one go. So we would be able to mitigate that risk and manage it through regular payments to get that down if it was required. So there could potentially be an on-flow effect, but in most cases, the discussions with the authority is that that variable loan will sit at zero for most of the year.
Thank you. Follow-up question. I noticed in their breakdown of how they're going to spend the 200,000, they've got here earmarked the work car for 53,000. In our capital budget, which we're looking at now, we've got a Mitsubishi Triton for the horse tram at 55,000. Yet, so if we gifted that car to them, why have we got it in our capital budget to purchase a new one for them?
Through the mayor, you're absolutely right. And the second budget workshop papers that we're working on at the moment removes that purchase from our capital listing. So it was included in the budget bids as a purchase, but as we've gone through and reconciled that, we've actually removed that from our listing and the authority will be responsible for it.
And a third question would be a second horse float. It's interesting. I didn't think they would be warranting a second horse float because they're not running many trams at any one time to require a second horse float to bearing enough horses around. But I guess that might be up for the board to answer that one.
Through the mayor again, it would, any of the budgets, including the capital items, would come to council as part of the subsidiaries' annual budget when they present it. So hopefully there would be explanation as to why they were acquiring the items each year as it comes up, so that council could ask those questions as well when it comes forward. So there would be an opportunity to investigate that and get some more commentary.
And sorry, I just remembered a fourth one. Originally, the horse tram, when they started using horses, was just using standard horses, but now we've gone to Clydesdales, where is any history on why we changed to Clydesdale? Because they are more expensive and more cost to run compared to the standard horses, which is photographs all around town where you can see the horse tram with standard horses. So I'm just wondering, is it something that we need to look at as a council to ensure that reduce the cost of running the horse tram authority and on the capital project by buying horses, certainly of that breed, where it could mostly do it much better and also still provide the service? Is that a question we could ask the board to consider?
Councillor Kemp, and I think the board might, I don't know very much about working horses, or the board might be able to answer that for you. Are there any other questions or anything that you want clarified in relation to that? Councillor Lidley, did you want to say something to close the debate?
I can only pass comment on the concept of standard horses. I'm not sure what a standard horse is. A standard bred horse is involved in harness racing, and they tow single person carts. A standard horse there is no such thing. So I would suggest that working horses, Clydesdales, draft horses, gypsy cobs, the like, are probably the way to go. And I think the Clydesdales are probably the most affordable of all those working horses.
Well, we'll get the tram board to follow up.
Absolutely, but I'll just make that comment. The question was asked in the conversation there.
That closes the debate on that. All those in favour? Recommendation on block. And sorry, can we do that again? All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. And those against? That's carried. Thank you. The,
Can we take a division on that, Mayor, please?
a division,
Yes.
certainly. All those in favour, please stand up. Just give Katie a second. Carol Schofield, Marilyn Henderson, Councillor Littley, Councillor Mann, and those against, Councillor Robertson, Councillor Glasbrook, and Councillor Kemp. That motion is lost. Carried. And we now move to 14.4. Again, staying with the Victor Harbour Horse Tram Authority, the reappointment of board members. If you're happy for me to do this on block, the first one is the report. The second one is endorsing Rachel Kennedy, and the second is endorsing Natasha Hunt. So I'll do those three on block. Moving that way, Councillor Littley. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to those? Councillor Littley?
Yeah, I feel strongly about this, the reappointment of these members. Given the past 2 years and the circumstances under which the Horse Tram Authority and the board members have operated and have worked pretty well, given some of the trials and tribulations that we've all faced across many business aspects and that. But you know, for the two board members to come through that, I think that they deserve a good run at it as well. They've shown, you know, great skill along the way against the challenges as well, and I think that you know, the reappointment is worthy.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Councillor Schofield, did you want to say anything? Seconder? Except you can't turn your microphone on. If you press your space bar, that might help. No, okay. Does anybody else want to say anything? In that case, all those in favour? And those against? That's carried, thank you. 14.5, the Fluores Regional Aquatic Centre Authority. Do that as well. The first recommendation receiving and noting the report, and the second recommendation endorsing Trish Kirkland. Moving that way, Councillor Kemp. And do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Robertson. Councillor Kemp, did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Just want to say, Ms. Trish Kirkland, when the new board was formed after a number of previous board members vacated, and what the board inherited at that time, Ms. Kirkland has certainly provided her expertise and knowledge from a corporate level across in the board room as well as in the audit committee. So I think, you know, she'd be a great asset to retain into the board of the Aquatic Centre and the authority to progress some of the strategic planning that's coming up and to endorse that. So I think that's a fantastic ability to.
Right, thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to that? In that case, all those in favour? Against? That's carried, thank you. We now come to the mayor and the recommendation. Move that way, thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconded by Field. Does anybody have any questions or any comments about? There's no questions. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. The elected member reports. We have one. Accepted, Councillor Henderson, thank you. And seconding that, thank you, Councillor Mann. Do you have any questions about Councillor Schofield's report? No. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. There are no matters of urgency. The questions on notification to the Red Hot Summer Tour from Councillor Hales. That's there for information, so we don't need to go through that. Are there any questions without notice? Any motions? Are there any motions without? We now move on to confidential items. And the first recommendation is that we go into confidence. I'll take that recommendation as read. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And do I have a seconder for that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Mann. Are there any questions about the recommendation? Not. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gary. We appreciate you listening in and taking an interest.